He's a composer, a musician, a musical director, and arranger. His portfolio encompasses several musical genres, and he has fans all around the world, and I'm one of them. I'm Isisara Bey, Artistic Director of the March on Washington Film Festival, and I'm referring to Damien Sneed. Damien is joining us today so that we can give a prelude to the program you're about to see, Hazel Scott, Darling of Cafe Society. Welcome, Damien.
Greetings. How are you, Isisara?
Wonderful. How are you? Thank you for being with us.
It's always a pleasure to do anything with you and the March on Washington Film Festival.
Great. So, this program, when I saw it, is so richly produced and so beautifully done. How did you get involved with it?
Well, it features my friend Camille Thurman, and also it features the biographer of Hazel Scott's story, my good friend Karen Chilton. I met her years ago working on a program celebrating the Migration series by artist Jacob Lawrence at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. And then we went on to work at the Green Space, WNYC, on a project called The Soul Now Sings. And most recently, we have composed an opera together. I'm the composer, she's a librettist, and it's titled The Tongue and the Lash, about the debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley. She's brilliant. So that's how I had a chance to work on this project in the Apollo celebration of the great Hazel Scott.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. We did a piece on Baldwin and the Buckley debate a year before last with the festival. Powerful. So we're going to hear more about Hazel Scott in the program. But what I wanted to get from you is, what does it take to be a world-renowned professional musician of her caliber and your caliber? What's the team you have to put together? How do you run this business?
It takes a lot of practice, a lot of deliberate movement to understand other composers and cultures, to flow between genres as Hazel Scott did so effortlessly. But it also takes a team. You have to have social media content managers, and you have to have a publicist. You have to have PR people. That's not just the publicist, but graphic designers. For example, I have a graphic designer in California. I have one here in New York and one in London, because sometimes there are jobs that need to be done and someone may be asleep. So I have people in different time zones to take care of that. You also need a couple of entertainment lawyers. One who may specialize in intellectual property for your compositions, for your commissions, and then you may need one who specializes in contract agreement law, or with the record label, recording industry issues. So there's someone who can handle business in France and London and Africa and Japan, and someone who deals with the United States or Canada. But you need a team of people. And most of all, I think it's important to have friends. I have people who have been with me, been around since the beginning of my career, before there was a career, people who can check in on me and say, hey, that was a little lackluster in your performance, or that outfit didn't look so good, but people that you can trust. All of those people help to make the team behind you, to be the wind beneath your wings, so to speak, as an artist, as someone like Hazel Scott, who did so many wonderful things, from playing the piano to arranging, even to being a phenomenal actress in Hollywood.
So you're not only a full-time musician, you're running a full-time business with a really extensive crew. So how did you get into this? How did you prepare? What was your training like as a child? What inspired you to be in music?
My parents, who adopted me at a very young age, my mother was born in 1933, my father in 1935. They were both educators. They pointed me to a young girl who sang at their wedding the song Moon River from Breakfast at Tiffany's. They pointed me to Jessie Norman. She was a freshman at Howard when she sang Moon River at their wedding. So growing up, they'd wake me up sometimes. They'd stop me from doing homework. They'd call me inside from playing outside with friends to watch Live from Lincoln Center Presents. And my parents would always say, one day you're going to perform with her. I had no idea I'd be able to work with her. I followed after her, going to Howard University, followed after her footsteps, going to Peabody Conservatory. She was a mentor to me. I had a chance to work with her last international performance and her last recording. But what's interesting with your question, Isisara, it really takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of study. I went to NYU studying music business and studying music technology, film scoring. going to Howard, studying classical music and traveling with the jazz ensemble. All of these experiences come together. Growing up in church, working with artists, uh, working as an intern with
Yeah.
record labels. All of these things come together to help give a consummate footing to be able to juggle all the things that I juggle, whether it's my record label, my foundation, traveling, performing as an artist, accompanying other singers, or maybe
Mhm.
even being a professor.
I wanted to ask you next, now that you're doing all of this, how do you maintain your skills, both technically and with your creativity? How do you inspire your creativity?
My creativity is inspired by looking at the lives of great artists. So when I mentioned Sidney Poitier and Jesse Norman, those are people my parents made me watch on television. Also Michael Jackson. I remember every time company would come over, I would have to reenact some Michael Jackson song. My father even had me look at the Donahue show, I'm dating myself, featuring Aretha Franklin. And he would talk
Mhm.
to me about the way that Aretha Franklin had to go play at funeral homes. Her father had her playing at funeral homes and singing just to get her experience. So for me, it's looking at those who have gone before me, whether it's a Harry Belafonte, whether it is uh, uh, a person that's acting or an artist or a dancer, or the great Alvin Ailey, looking at their stories, seeing what challenges they had and how they were able to move beyond them. As a creative, as a savant, we encounter many challenges that life brings, but we have to learn, as Jesse Norman always told me, to set our faces flint and to focus on the performance, to focus, as Wynton Marsalis says, on the music and not
Mhm.
all the external things that come around. So it's important to practice. It's important to listen to other styles and genres of music, read books about culture. But one of my important elements that I need to be successful is rest, proper rest.
Mhm.
So, in
Mhm.
spite of how busy I am,
Mhm.
I'm constantly plugging in, writing in my calendar opportunities to sleep and opportunities to just sit and maybe watch TV or do absolutely nothing. It's so important to
Yes.
have balance.
I agree with you. Part of my own creative process is large stretches of doing nothing because ideas come then. My creativity is just has space to grow. So, a working musician such as yourself and Hazel Scott, you spend a lot of time on the road. Why is touring important? And how does that impact your life?
Touring is important because it keeps you on the pulse of what's going on. For example, I have a tour, Our Song, Our Story, featuring two phenomenal singers, operatic stars, Brandy Sutton and Rayhan Bryce Davis, as well as an African American string quartet, which features classical music, spirituals, opera arias, lieder, things like that, in homage to people like Jesse Norman and Marian Anderson. But then at the same time, I have another tour almost happening right on the cusp or the end of that tour. It's called A Tribute to Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, and it's featuring two of my former bosses, Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson and Karen Clark Sheard of the Clark Sisters, two totally different styles of music. But as a professor and as a performer, it helps me to stay on the precipice of being accurate, being actually legitimate in the styles that I try to approach as a multi-genre artist. It helps me to be aware of what it's like, not just to teach in aesthetic and principle, but to teach from a real place, experientially, of really being out there on the road, really working, having the ability to understand how to keep the voice, how to keep the body, how to always be present, and how to deliver 199,000% every single time I'm before people.
I'm going to throw in a quick question, and that is any favorite place you love to go to tour?
Oh, yes, I love London. I love going to Toronto, something about Toronto and,
Wow.
British Columbia, Vancouver, and
Okay.
then, of course, I love going to California. I just love traveling, no if it's San Francisco or Los Angeles or San Luis Obispo, it doesn't matter, I just love California.
Excellent. So we'll see in the piece in a few minutes that Hazel Scott lived and worked through Jim Crow, the McCarthy hearings, and the civil rights movement. And she faced outright racism in both her musical life and Hollywood. As a contemporary musician and performer, are there any parallels from then to now? How has diversity or the lack thereof impacted your career?
Diversity is present. Sometimes I don't think that we've made it yet. Martin Luther King Jr., a mentor of mine, had a dream. We're still not completely there yet. Um, I know personally with my own experiences growing up in Augusta, Georgia, and my parents who had to drink from colored water fountains. I've experienced racism. I've experienced bias and prejudice. I've been called a monkey. I've been told that I would not be successful in classical music because, as an African American man, I should stick to jazz or basketball. I
Mhm.
remember leaving Lincoln Center dressed in a tuxedo, leaving a performance, and being pulled over by the police, asking and inquiring of me why I'm driving the vehicle that I'm driving. I don't belong in that type of car. And I said, well, I'm coming from a performance at Lincoln Center. And they laughed and scoffed at me and said, surely you can't be coming from a performance. You probably were the valet driver or the help, and you took someone's vehicle. So when I reached in the back, as their flashlight followed my hand to get the playbill to show them that I actually was the conductor of that performance, they laughed at me and said, well, we don't know why you're here. And I said, I'm a professor. You can check me out. Everything checks out. And I showed them my ID that I was a professor at a university. And just the fact that I had to experience that recently, it lets me know that still as an African American man, I'm an endangered species. So I try to make sure that I utilize my platform as an artist for protest and reconciliation and for social change, because it doesn't matter if you're an African American male, African American, no matter what your culture is, no matter what your views or beliefs are, you should be respected as an equal person, as an equal human being in the earth. But many times it doesn't happen. So Hazel Scott paved the way for people like me, Hazel Scott and many others. But it's important, I think, that artists like myself, my peers, that we continue to forge ahead with the work and the groundwork that was laid before us, because racism is still very present, despite the terms diversity and equity and inclusion. We
Mhm.
need platforms like this. We need organizations like the March on Washington Film Festival, people like this organization, other artists and other organizations around the world help artists like myself have a platform to share art, to share it in excellence, but also to make sure that we're sharing the stories, to give voice to those who did not have a voice, and to celebrate those who have gone on before us, to make sure that there's equality for everyone.
Very well said. I'm going to take us now from the past and the present to the future, and that is, who are some emerging or contemporary artists who you think are bringing their musicianship, their charisma, their creativity, like you, like Hazel Scott, to the music and cultural scene today?
There's so many artists, Janelle Monáe, Andra Day, Jill Scott, so many great people. I can think of my friend Corey Henry. He's in all many different genres of music. Think of my friend in gospel music, Kiera Sheard. Also in classical music, my friend Janae Bridges. There's so many
Yes.
artists I could go on, but there are people who have sort of picked up their plow, and they're working as I'm working to try to make sure that we continue to keep our voices forward.
Exciting times, and you're adding to the excitement and the promise. Thank you so much, Damien. We look forward to seeing you in just a few minutes. Apply your trade and show us your creativity in action. We wish you every success in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
And so, everyone, now is the time. Prepare yourself for a dynamic presentation. Hazel Scott, Darling of Cafe Society, produced by our cultural partner, the Apollo Theater, and part of the March on Washington Film Festival's African American History Month commemoration. Enjoy.